Welcome to my channel, The Quiet Observer, where we break down human behavior, psychology, and the patterns most people miss. Now let's get into today's video.
Have you ever noticed how time seems to behave differently when you are truly lost in something you love? 1 minute, you're sitting down to start a project at 9 in the morning, and the next time you look at the clock, the sun is dipping below the horizon and you've forgotten to eat lunch. In those hours, the world outside your immediate task simply ceased to exist. Your self-consciousness vanished. Your inner critic went silent, and every action followed the previous one with a kind of effortless grace. This isn't just a lucky streak of productivity. This is the flow state, often called being in the zone, and it is perhaps the most potent psychological weapon we have against the modern epidemic of distraction and the heavy, stifling presence of brain fog. But for many of us, especially those grappling with the mental fatigue of the digital age, flow feels less like a reliable tool and more like a rare, accidental visitor. We spend our days wading through a thick, gray mist of brain fog, where thoughts feel sluggish, focus feels impossible, and the simplest tasks feel like climbing a mountain in flip-flops. If you've ever felt like your brain is a computer with too many tabs open, running on a dying battery, you know exactly what I mean. The good news is that flow isn't a mystical gift reserved for elite athletes or virtuoso musicians. It is a biological process with specific triggers, and by understanding the mechanics of the mind, we can learn how to clear the fog and summon deep focus on command. To understand how to get there, we first have to understand what's happening inside the gray matter. When you enter a flow state, your brain undergoes a fascinating transition called transient hypofrontality. That fancy way of saying that the prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain responsible for complex planning, logical thinking, and that annoying little voice that tells you you're doing a bad job, temporarily slows down. It's a paradox. To perform at your absolute peak, you actually have to turn off the part of your brain that tries the hardest. When that internal CEO takes a coffee break, the rest of your brain is free to process information at lightning speed, relying on intuition and ingrained skill rather than overanalysis. This is why flow feels so good. It provides a neurochemical cocktail of dopamine, serotonin, and endorphins that not only boosts performance but also makes us feel incredibly alive. However, the barrier for most of us is that brain fog is the literal opposite of this state. Brain fog is usually caused by an overload of cortisol, the stress hormone, or a lack of the very neurochemicals that flow provides. It's a state of high friction. Flow, by contrast, is a state of zero friction. So, the question becomes, how do we build a bridge from the fog to the flow? The first step is addressing the environment, but not in the way most people think. It's not just about a clean desk. It's about cognitive load. Imagine your brain has a limited amount of RAM, like a computer. Every notification, every unwashed dish in your peripheral vision, and every to-do item floating in your head is a background program eating up that RAM. To trigger flow, you must aggressively shut down these programs. This means monotasking. The myth of multitasking is the greatest enemy of deep focus. Every time you switch your attention from a report to a text message, you pay a switching cost that leaves a residue of distraction on your brain for up to 20 minutes. If you're checking your phone every 10 minutes, you are literally preventing your brain from ever reaching the depth required for flow. Once you've cleared the external noise, you have to look at the challenge-test skill ratio. This is the golden rule of flow. If a task is too easy, you get bored and your mind wanders. If a task is too hard, you get anxious. And anxiety is the ultimate flow lives in the Goldilocks zone, the narrow corridor where the task is just slightly beyond your current comfort zone. You want to feel a little bit of a stretch, a little bit of, I'm not sure I can do this, but without the paralyzing fear of total failure. If you're feeling brain fog, the problem is often that you're looking at a massive, overwhelming goal. To fix this, you have to chunk the work. Don't try to write a book. Try to write 3 paragraphs of one specific scene. By lowering the barrier to entry while keeping the quality of the challenge high, you give your brain a clear target to lock onto. Another powerful trigger is clear goals and immediate feedback. Think about a video game. Why is it so easy to spend 5 hours playing a game, but 5 minutes writing an email feels like torture? It's because the game gives you a clear objective and instant feedback. You know exactly what you need to do, and you know immediately if you've succeeded. When we work, we often have vague goals, like make progress on the project. That vagueness is like fuel for brain fog. To trigger flow, you need to define exactly what success looks like for the next 60 minutes. I will finish the first draft of the budget proposal is a goal. Working on the budget is just a suggestion. When your brain knows exactly where the finish line is, it stops wasting energy, scanning the horizon for directions. But what about the biological side? If you're struggling with brain fog, you might be fighting an uphill battle against your own physiology. Deep focus is an energy-intensive process. If you're dehydrated, sleep-deprived, or crashing from a sugar high, your brain simply won't have the fuel to enter flow. One of the most effective ways to clear the fog is through active recovery. We often think that scrolling through social media is a break, but it's actually more input for a tired brain. True recovery means getting away from screens, moving your body, or practicing deep breathing. Even 5 minutes of intentional breathing can lower your cortisol levels enough to allow your focus to return. There is also the concept of the struggle phase. This is a part of the flow cycle that many people mistake for failure. Before you enter flow, there is almost always a period of frustration. You feel clunky, the words won't come, and the fog feels thicker than ever. Most people give up here. They think, I'm just not feeling it today. But psychology tells us that this struggle is actually the brain loading the necessary information and preparing to switch gears. If you can push through those first 15 to 20 minutes of discomfort, you are often just moments away from the release phase, where the fog parts and the flow begins. The key is to expect the struggle and view it as a sign that you are on the right track rather than a sign to quit. Now, let's talk about the deep work ritual. To trigger flow on command, you need to build a neurological bridge signal to your brain that it's time to focus. This could be a specific playlist of instrumental music, a certain type of tea, or even a specific lighting setup in your room. Over time, your brain associates these sensory cues with deep focus. When you put on those noise-canceling headphones and hit play on that one specific lo-fi beat, you are telling your subconscious, the fog is over. It's time to work. It's a form of self-hypnosis that bypasses the resistance of the prefrontal cortex. For those who struggle with chronic brain fog, perhaps the most important lesson is compassionate discipline. Often, we get angry at our inability to focus, which creates a loop of stress that only makes the fog worse. Flow is a state of effortless effort. You cannot force your way into it with sheer willpower alone. You have to entice your brain into it. If you're having a high-fort day, don't try to conquer the world. Start with the smallest possible flow-inducing activity. Maybe that's just organizing a single folder or writing one clear sentence. Success breeds dopamine, and dopamine is the wind that blows the fog away. As we wrap up this exploration, remember that flow is a skill, not a stroke of luck. It is the result of setting the right conditions. A clear goal, a balanced challenge, a distraction-free environment, and the patience to weather the initial struggle. When you learn to master these triggers, you aren't just becoming more productive, you are improving your quality of life. The fog might still roll in from time to time, that is just part of being human in a chaotic world, but you will have the compass and the map to find your way back to the clarity of the zone. Next time you sit down to work and feel that familiar heaviness in your mind, don't fight the fog. Instead, turn down the noise, pick one small but challenging task, and give yourself permission to struggle for a few minutes. You might just find that on the other side of that frustration lies a version of yourself that is faster, sharper, and more capable than you ever imagined.
Thanks for watching The Quiet Observer. If you'd like to go deeper, I've linked some helpful self-help books in the description below. I'll see you in the next video.